Savannah Guthrie has spent decades behind the anchor desk, pressing powerful people to tell the truth. She has looked senators, presidents, and CEOs in the eye and demanded accountability. As a leading voice on Today, she became one of the most trusted faces in American journalism. It is the man she went home to, the man she built a family with, the man most people never thought twice about until they had to. Shaping narratives, advising leaders, and staying carefully out of the frame. But now he is in the frame, and the story building around him is not the kind that fits neatly into a 2-minute segment. There is a stalled investigation, questions without clean answers, and at the center of it all sits the husband of one of America's most recognizable journalists. To understand why this story matters, you have to understand who Savannah Guthrie really is, beyond the polished version seen every weekday morning. She grew up in Tucson, Arizona, with modest beginnings. In a family that valued hard work and quiet dignity, she studied journalism, then law, passed the bar, and built a career many only dream about. When she joined the Today Show, she did more than fill a seat, to pressing political heavyweights until they visibly squirmed on live television. Married Michael Feldman in 2014. By then, she was already a major figure in broadcast journalism. He was known in quieter, more strategic Washington circles, where influence is currency and access is everything. A prominent communications and lobbying firm based in Washington, D.C., the firm worked with major corporations, government agencies, political campaigns, and foreign governments navigating American political waters. It was serious work, serious money, and serious influence. Together, they built a life that looked like the American dream realized. 2 children, a career at the summit of journalism, and a husband with deep ties to the political class she covered. Daily, for years, that proximity journalist married to political insider was simply part of their reality. Complicated, perhaps, but manageable. Then something shifted. Questions began surfacing about lobbying activities, connected to foreign entities, and whether disclosures had fully matched the reality of the work performed. Your foreign lobbying in the United States is governed by the Foreign Agents Registration Act, commonly known as FARA, which requires those representing foreign governments or political interests to register with the Department of Justice and disclose their activities. On paper, it seems straightforward. In practice, it operates in a gray area shaped by interpretation and precedent. An investigation examining foreign influence and disclosure practices began pulling threads across multiple firms and individuals. Most led nowhere dramatic, but some connected indirectly to Glover Park Group and raised questions about whether certain client relationships had been fully and accurately characterized. The investigation did not begin with Feldman, but his name entered conversations quietly. For months, the process moved, normally documents gathered, interviews conducted until it slowed dramatically. Expected follow-ups did not happen. Momentum dissipated. No official explanation was offered. In Washington, unexplained slowdowns draw attention. One possibility is simple. The investigation found nothing of substance. That version may even be true. Yet the silence surrounding the stall is not the silence of clear resolution. It is the silence of uncertainty. Sources speak only anonymously and cautiously. A former federal official described how some investigations reach a point where political cost becomes a factor in resource allocation. But reality does not require conspiracy. It reflects how institutions function when powerful networks intersect. Michael Feldman's connections are significant. His professional relationships span political lines. His wife is among the country's most prominent journalists. That is not an accusation, only a description of proximity to power. Yes. Savannah Guthrie has said little publicly about the matter. As a lawyer and seasoned journalist, she understands how words can shape outcomes. Silence in such moments can be strategic, but it also carries cost. Each day without resolution keeps questions alive in newsrooms, congressional offices, and private conversations that shape perception. What makes this case striking is its suspended state. No indictments, no formal findings, no public exoneration, only lingering uncertainty. Some believe it will eventually resolve cleanly. Others believe it may never reach a definitive conclusion, absorbed instead into the complex machinery of Washington. What the situation reveals is how power often operates not through dramatic climaxes, but through ambiguity. Inertia. Savannah Guthrie has built her professional identity on the belief that questions deserve answers and accountability matters. Her integrity as a journalist is not in question. The harder issue is personal. What happens when the demand for accountability brushes against the life you have built and the person you love? It is a question with no easy response. Those who know her describe steadiness under pressure, from serious health scares to the relentless demands of live television. That steadiness may be what carries her now as she balances loyalty to her family with commitment to truth. She continues to appear each morning, maintaining the competence and presence that have defined her career. Whatever private conversations have taken place remain private. Investigation, the stall, and the unanswered questions remain real. So do the human beings at the center of them: complex, capable, imperfect. Stories like this rarely conclude with satisfying clarity. Investigations stall. Truth moves slowly. What remains is complexity: a respected journalist, a sophisticated political operator, and an intersection of media and political power now under quiet scrutiny. No one yet knows how it will end. The longer the uncertainty lingers, the more it. In Washington, perception has weight. It shapes invitations, partnerships, bookings, quiet endorsements, and subtle exclusions. The mere existence of an unresolved question can alter how rooms feel when someone walks into them. That is the quiet consequence of proximity to power under scrutiny. For Michael Feldman, a strategist whose influence has always depended on trust and discretion, that shift matters. Lobbying and communications operate on confidence. Clients hire firms not only for expertise, but for stability, for the assurance that nothing unpredictable will erupt and disrupt their objectives. Even a stalled investigation, especially a stalled investigation, introduces unpredictability. It leaves open a question mark where there used to be a period. For Savannah Guthrie, the stakes are different but equally complex. Viewers trust her not only because of what she asks, but because of what they believe about her independence. When your spouse operates inside the political ecosystem you cover, the balance must be handled with extraordinary care. News organizations establish ethical guidelines for precisely these situations, creating firewalls and disclosure standards meant to protect integrity. To manage them transparently, investigations do not unfold only in offices and court filings. They unfold at kitchen tables, in late night conversations, in moments when children are asleep, and two adults weigh not just legal strategy but emotional endurance. Guarantee of resolution. Observers often look for a dramatic turning point, a leaked memo, announcement. They fade in and out of headlines. They remain technically open while functionally dormant. Inside that ambiguity, what makes this situation particularly resonant is the symbolic tension it represents. Those roles are not inherently incompatible. In fact, many couples navigate similar intersections successfully. The contrast becomes impossible to ignore. It is important to recognize that stalled does not mean suppressed, and scrutiny does not equal guilt. Investigations can slow for countless reasons, shifting priorities. The absence of public action is not proof of hidden interference. Of resolution is not the same as vindication. Life does not pause simply because clarity has not arrived. That something subtle shifts in how narratives are framed and how silence is interpreted. Every public appearance becomes slightly more scrutinized. Every carefully worded statement becomes slightly more analyzed. Perhaps the most honest conclusion at this moment is that there is no conclusion. Only an ongoing process unfolding largely out of view. The questions remain open. The investigation remains stalled. The people at the center remain publicly composed and privately navigating whatever realities they face. History shows that some stories like this eventually crystallize into clear outcomes: charges filed or definitively declined. Official reports issued, statements made. Others slowly dissolve, overtaken by new events and shifting attention. Which path this one will take is impossible to predict. What is certain is that it forces a broader reflection on how power, media, and politics intertwine in modern America. It highlights how proximity can complicate perception, how silence can be both protective and costly, and how accountability is often more complex than the slogans that demand it. For now, Savannah Guthrie continues to sit across from powerful figures, asking hard questions. Michael Feldman continues to exist within a political world built on strategy and influence. The intersection of those two realities remains under quiet watch, and until something definitive changes, the story stays suspended and finished, unresolved and undeniably significant. As time passes, the intensity of public attention may fluctuate, but the underlying dynamics do not simply disappear. In environments like Washington, memory is long. People remember who was investigated, who was mentioned in passing, who appeared in a footnote of a filing years earlier. Even when no formal wrongdoing is established, the association can linger in subtle ways that shape future opportunities. In relationships, there is also the institutional dimension. When an inquiry slows without a clear public explanation, it inevitably feeds speculation about how decisions are made behind closed doors. Are resources being redirected? Did priorities shift? Was there insufficient evidence to proceed? Or did the case simply become too complicated, too entangled in networks of influence to push forward cleanly? None of those possibilities automatically imply misconduct, but the lack of clarity creates space for interpretation, and interpretation can be powerful. Inside major media organizations, situations like this are handled carefully. Editors and executives weigh optics, ethics, and fairness. They consider whether coverage requires disclosure, recusal, or distance. Those internal conversations rarely become public, but they are real. The credibility of a newsroom depends on anticipating even the appearance of conflict. Maintaining that credibility is not only about avoiding wrongdoing, it is about protecting trust. For Savannah, that trust has been built over decades of disciplined work. Audiences have watched her navigate presidential debates, Supreme Court confirmations, national crises, and deeply personal interviews. Trust is not established in a single broadcast. It is accumulated gradually. That accumulation does not vanish overnight. It can be tested by circumstances that blur personal and professional boundaries. For Michael, the challenge is different. Political strategy is inherently transactional, thrives on access, discretion, and relationships. When scrutiny enters the picture, even quietly, it can alter how potential clients assess risk. Firms in Washington are acutely sensitive to perception. They understand that headlines, even cautious, qualified ones, can influence corporate boards and foreign principals weighing whether to sign contracts. A stalled investigation may not carry the weight of a charge, but it introduces uncertainty into calculations that are already complex. At a human level, prolonged uncertainty can be more exhausting than a definitive outcome. A clear resolution, positive or negative at least, provides direction. An unresolved state demands patience without timeline. It requires living with unanswered questions that resurface whenever the story is mentioned, whenever a related case appears in the news, whenever political winds shift. There is also a broader societal context. Over the past decade, public skepticism about institutions, media, government, corporations has intensified. Stories that connect those institutions, even indirectly, resonate because they tap into that skepticism. They become symbols larger than the individuals involved. In that sense, this situation is not only about one couple or one firm. It reflects ongoing debates about transparency, influence, and accountability in modern democracy. Yet symbolism can oversimplify reality. The truth of most high-level investigations is rarely cinematic. It is procedural, technical, filled with legal nuance and regulatory interpretation. The line between aggressive advocacy and unlawful conduct is often narrower and more technical than public narratives suggest. Determining whether it was crossed requires painstaking review of documents, communications, contracts, and intent. That process can be slow by design until that process yields something concrete or formally concludes. What remains is tension. Not explosive tension, but a steady undercurrent, a recognition that something significant began and has not clearly ended. Sense that important questions entered the system and have yet to receive visible answers, and so life continues in parallel. Morning broadcasts proceed. Political strategies evolve. New headlines compete for attention. The public eye moves on and then occasionally returns. The stalled investigation exists in the background, neither forgotten nor fully illuminated. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of all is how quietly this kind of story unfolds. No dramatic press conferences, no sweeping declarations, but just documents. Filed, interviews conducted, and then pause. In that pause lies the complexity of modern power where influence is diffuse. Networks are intertwined and outcomes are rarely simple, whether this chapter eventually closes with clarity or fades into bureaucratic obscurity. It has already served as a reminder. Proximity to power carries advantages, but it also carries exposure. The closer one stands to the machinery of influence, the more likely one is to feel its weight when scrutiny arises. For now, the questions remain suspended. The individuals involved continue their work, and the story waits quietly, persistently for whatever comes next. In situations like this, the waiting becomes its own storyline. Reporters who once chased updates begin to check in less frequently, but they never completely stop. Sources who were once willing to speculate grow quieter. Files remain open in databases. Names remain searchable. And in the background, machinery of oversight either inches forward or settles into stillness. There is something uniquely modern about this kind of uncertainty. In another era, an investigation might have unfolded largely out of public view. Today, even partial information circulates instantly. Fragments become discussion threads. Silence becomes analysis. A lack of visible movement becomes interpreted as movement of another kind. The digital age does not allow ambiguity to remain neutral, turns it into narrative. For a public figure, that means living with a story that can resurface at any moment. A new political development, a renewed focus on foreign lobbying, a shift in Justice Department priorities, any of these could pull the stalled questions back into sharper focus. Or none of them might. That unpredictability shapes how carefully people move. It also raises a deeper question about fairness. At what point does prolonged uncertainty become its own penalty? If no formal finding is ever issued, if no charges are brought, if no definitive conclusion is announced, what does that mean for the people involved? Does the absence of resolution serve justice, or does it simply preserve doubt indefinitely? There are no easy answers to that. At the same time, public accountability does not function on comfort alone. When influence intersects with governance, especially influence connected to foreign interest, scrutiny is not optional. It is part of the democratic process. Transparency laws exist precisely because access can be powerful, and power without oversight can distort public trust. The tension between protecting individual reputations and pursuing institutional integrity is real and ongoing. For Savannah, the public dimension of that tension is unavoidable. Her professional life is built on asking others to respond clearly. When questions arise, viewers have watched her insist on specifics, press for timelines, and return to topics when answers feel incomplete. That consistency is part of her credibility. When ambiguity touches her own world, even indirectly, the standard she has long upheld becomes part of the conversation. For Michael, the calculus is likely more strategic. In Washington, there are moments when speaking publicly can escalate scrutiny rather than resolve it. There are also moments when silence can allow speculation to expand unchecked. Deciding which path carries less risk is rarely straightforward. Legal counsel, public relations advisors, and personal judgment all intersect in those decisions. Meanwhile, life beyond headlines continues. Children grow, careers evolve, health matters. Private milestones happen whether or not public uncertainty lingers. That contrast between the deeply personal and the broadly political is one of the hardest aspects of living at the intersection of media and power. The outside world often sees only the symbolic stakes. The inside world feels the emotional ones.